But what happens in the brain between online or more mediated social contact and in-person social contact? What cues is the brain processing in those situations, in a face-to-face situation that you don't get online or you don't get in canned situation? Well, Sandy Pentland is somebody who's done a lot of research on this, and he more or less boiled it down to 4 types of signals. I'm sure there are more. Mimicry and synchrony, which means essentially when people unconsciously mimic each other. I bet you didn't know, for example, that if they mimic your order verbatim, they get a 40% on average increase in their tip. Okay, we love it when people mimic us, whether it's our body language, whether it's the tone of our voice. It indicates that we're of one mind. The activity level, how much interest there is in what we're saying, in the other person and in the speaker. How much the person's expression affects the other person's. That's the influence. And consistency is an interesting one for those of us who are in business or people who are interested in business. It indicates the fluidity of speech and movement, your self-confidence more or less. And so when you measure these things, they together predict the level of trust between partners, social partners. They indicate group cohesion, they indicate confidence, productivity, they even indicate who's going to be the leader in a group. Now you might be wondering, how do you measure that? And you measure it with something that looks like an iPhone. And here's what's called a sociometer, and it picks up all of those signals in social situations. And it was developed by this guy, Daniel Olguin, along with Sandy Pentland. And essentially it crunches all the data, you know, how much my arms are moving around, how much you might be laughing afterwards when we go to this place called the tea kettle or whatever it's called, who's interacting with whom, who gets the most attention, what is the volume of their voice, that sort of thing. And they found that they can predict, when they crunch all these data without the content, that they can predict up to 40% of what goes on in negotiations and job interviews later. They've done a lot of they've used a lot of these in sort of banks and big corporations to find out how social interaction affects productivity. And what they've learned is social groups in particular that communicate face-to-face are much more cohesive due to all that rich signaling. But larger, more diverse groups that share less complex information, they're just fine online. So it's a question of shading. You know, if you can communicate something succinctly without a lot of discussion, then online networks are perfectly fine. But if you need to have trust in a small working group, then you really need to be together.